All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Thank you and good morning, everybody, for joining us. I'm sure others are going to join in here as we go. Thanks for joining our April version of our cybersecurity awareness training. We do this on a monthly basis, so obviously it's recommended to join us when you can. These slides, some of it is repetitive, and some of it does change, obviously, based on the landscape of what happens. Obviously in cybersecurity, things change very fast and very often. So without that, we'll, further ado, we'll go ahead and get started here. So my name is Brian Powell. I am actually the CTO here at PCA Technology Group. I'm also an ethical hacker. So basically what that really means is everything I'm talking about here, I have the capability of actually performing. Obviously you need to know how to do some of this stuff in order to protect from the bad guys. So that's really all that necessarily means. So the other thing too, just some housekeeping, everyone is muted at this point. If you do have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I will try to monitor that. We also have another person monitoring the chat in the background. If I don't get it as we're going through the slide, I will circle back at the end. So if you do have questions, just please put them there in the chat. So the big question is, what's the big deal about cybersecurity? Well, anybody that watches the news or reads the paper or, goes on websites, whatever, any type of news site, you'll see that there's all kinds of cybersecurity events constantly getting posted. I have just a few on this slide here, that were just recently announced within the past 2 weeks or so. A big one was Okta. That is an identity company that was breached back in just January, and they finally came clean about it. MailChimp just happened the last few days. That mail service was actually compromised. It's kind of a targeted attack. They're actually going after some crypto companies, but the fact that they breached the back end of that, they basically could go after anybody they want. GitLab was another one that just was recently announced. That's kind of a development platform. And then locally, Verizon, some people, maybe even on this call, perhaps, I know I've gotten one myself, and a couple of my coworkers too, that, you basically get a text from yourself saying, thank you for your payment. And it looks like it's coming from yourself. It's a Verizon scam. And basically you click on the link and they kind of manipulate you and try to trick you into giving out information and stuff. So, those are just 4 examples that happened in the past 2-3 weeks. And, this changes all the time. Next week it's going to be probably 2 or 3 more. So you can see that, there's a big need for cybersecurity. So even last year, the events, almost really exceeded the year previously, and this year is starting out to be no different. It's going to increasingly get harder and harder to just try to protect yourself, and you got to be diligent and try to do the best you can. So the other thing too is that some businesses, depending on what your line of business is, sometimes you have compliance, or if you do get cyber insurance, which I would probably highly recommend at this point. A lot of times your policy holders will have the requirements that some of this you'd have to do certain things in order to get that policy. Otherwise, they're not going to give it to you. You're going to pay significantly. If you do have cyber insurance, when your renewal comes up, you'll see that it's much more stringent to get that policy renewed. And it's probably going to be more expensive too, because this before it was one of those things where, oh well, I'm buying this as a safeguard, and now it's the same thing, but it's being utilized much more frequently now. So obviously the insurance providers definitely are in it to make money. So the more they pay out, the more you guys have to pay in. So that's kind of how that works, unfortunately. So who's responsible when it comes to cybersecurity? You know, a lot of times people are like, oh, well, that's my IT company or that's my IT department, or I don't need to worry about that. Yes, the IT department and they do the best they can to try to protect you from the bad guys. However, it only is as good as where the buck stops at the person sitting in the chair. What we call is the human firewall, and basically that's everybody that uses a computer. So, you know, as an IT provider, we could put all kinds of security layers in place. But if you let a bad guy in inadvertently or intentionally, however it ends up being, then it pretty much bypasses all that security stuff. You know, I kind of think of it, I use the analogy of, you know, in your personal home, you may have an alarm system and, you know, that's to keep the bad guys out. But if you don't arm that alarm system, you know, that pretty much defeats the whole purpose of that alarm. You know, long gone are the days of just putting an ADP sign out in your front yard, thinking that, you know, that's going to deter people from breaking into your house when you really don't even have an alarm system in there. They're gonna test things. You know, there's ways of figuring out if there is an alarm in there and all this other stuff. So they can look for wiring, they can look for window sensors, they can look for all that stuff. So the signs, you know, what used to work in the old days probably isn't going to work anymore, at least not efficiently. So basically, it's everybody on this call is responsible for cybersecurity. So that's owners, employees, everyone. And you can see, as I mentioned, you know, in this, kind of use this as a joke, but you know, you could put all the layers of security in one corner in a boxing ring, and on the other side is human error. Again, you know, in this case, the person's a Dave, so the idea is don't be a Dave. I don't see any Daves on this call, so I don't need to apologize for taking shots at somebody inadvertently. But you know, the idea is that, you know, don't be that person. And you know, it's not intentional, but not everybody is strong with computers. Not everybody is strong with IT. Sometimes you just do it because you have to, and that's fine. You know, I'm not saying everybody has to be a computer expert, but that's what this presentation is about, is to try to give you some tips and tricks on what to look for, what to be aware of, some of the tactics, and hopefully avoid some of these cybersecurity pitfalls. So the other thing too to keep in mind is that, you know, if a bad guy does happen to get into your system some way, shape, or form, it's not like they send off all kinds of red bells or flares or, hey, I got you. You know, they don't do that. They kind of, first of all, usually they stumble upon you. They're not really targeting you per se. So once they get, you know, something on the end of the line biting, they got to figure out who it is. So what they do is they get in, they figure out, okay, what kind of company is this? What kind of value is there? And sometimes they're in your system for up to 7 months before they make themselves known to that entity or that company or that individual. And you know, the idea is that we want to try to catch these individuals early to stop some of that potential damage that they could do in the back end there. The other thing, statistic too, is that, you know, if you do have a major cybersecurity event, 60% of those businesses potentially go out of business within 6 months after the fact. So you can see how detrimental sometimes these cybersecurity events are. So how's this all done? Well, it's done with a technique called social engineering. And basically what that is, it's a manipulation of human trust, really. I like to use it, think of it as a glorified con man. So back in the day, you know, you had your con mans trying to get you to buy snake oil or swampland in Florida, thinking you had this prime real estate. This is just the electronic form of it. It's basically trying to manipulate someone's behavior to get them to do what you want. And it's extremely easy, unfortunately. And it's just one of those things where, you know, if you do the right tactic, you can get people to interact the way you want them to, extremely easy. So we're going to explain some of what that is. So the most common techniques and attacks are, obviously, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about email. Phishing is one of those things that is used heavily. There's various forms of phishing, and we'll walk through what those various forms look like. Social media. Social media is a treasure trove of information from a bad guy standpoint. I can get all kinds of information off of people's social media sites, and I'm not just talking, your Twitters, your Instagrams, your Facebooks. I'm talking your LinkedIn's too. So even your business social media stuff. Just be careful what you're posting out there, because it's very easy to gain a whole lot of information off those sites that could technically be used, in a malicious way without you even realizing it. One example quickly is, sometimes you see them surveys that pop up on Facebook sometimes. Oh, well, if you had to pick between, whatever, this car, that car, what is it? When was what was your high school mascot or something like that? You're answering those questions, and what you may not realize is behind the scenes, it's probably a bad actor actually putting that survey out there, and a lot of those answers that you're giving are actually password reset answers. So if they're trying to breach your account and they need a password reset, you just gave them potentially your high school mascot, which will tell you what school you went to, and that could be one of your password resets, or your favorite color, your favorite food. It could be asked in such a way that it's not physically asking what your favorite color is, but if you put, multiple colors on a thing and you do it multiple times, eventually, if you have a common color across those surveys, it's probably your favorite color. So, that's just something to be aware of. The other thing too is, from a child standpoint, I realize a lot of parents are excited about their kids going back to school and stuff, and I see all these little chalkboards with their, my child's is this, and her second grade teacher or first grade teacher, they're giving all this information out. And what you don't realize is the bad guys actually keep all that information. And a lot of times that information isn't going to change when they get older. So now you're giving password reset information for your child before they're even old enough to use that stuff without you even realizing it. So, be careful what you're posting out there. That's all I'm going to say on that, but be very, very careful, because it could be used in very malicious ways. Most of the trends, when it comes to this, is ransomware. If you're not familiar with what ransomware is, basically the bad guy gets in there and they either steal your data a lot of times if it's valuable, and they try to sell it on the dark web, or they encrypt your data. So basically they lock your data in the fact that you can't use it anymore. And in order for you to be able to use it again, you have to pay them X amount of dollars and hope that they give you the key to unlock that data so you can use it again. Sometimes they do both. Sometimes they get you on both sides. They steal your data, try to sell it, and they also encrypt it. So they're getting money from the encryption unlocking, and they're getting money from keeping it, potentially from not being sold. So the idea is to try to avoid that completely. Who's behind it? Sometimes, it's criminal groups, could be malicious governments, perhaps. Sometimes it's actually insiders. Not very often, but sometimes that does occur, unfortunately. So most of the time, the attack vectors, as I mentioned, most of it's electronic form. Occasionally, you may have like an on-site one or something, but that's usually revolves around a malicious insider at that point. So one thing when it comes to web surfing, if you do any type of web surfing from work, what I recommend and what we recommend is keep it to business use only. If you do that, it actually makes your attack vector much smaller than just blindly surfing everything under the sun like you're at your home. Don't do your personal shopping. Don't do that kind of stuff. While you're at work. As I mentioned, social media, unless you're using that for business purposes, I would say stay away from it. Again, there's a lot of stuff, malicious stuff that's on there. So I would definitely stay away from the social media sites at all possible. Browsers, keep your browsers updated. There's constantly exploits for all these browsers that are out there. So I recommend that usually most of the time the browsers will update themselves if you're using Firefox or Google Chrome, maybe Edge from the Windows side, Safari perhaps. Just make sure your browsers are updated. Most of the time it'll tell you that it needs updated. If you see that, make sure you update it, because like I said, there's a lot of 0 days is what they're called, and basically that means that it's an active exploit that is happening, and unless you patch it, you could fall victim to that if someone figures out that you're not patched, and you visit a site that is looking for an unpatched browser. So you also want to be suspicious of pop-up windows. That's one way of easily manipulating somebody, especially in a panic situation. So, if I want to get you to click on a specific pop-up window, I could craft one that is adult oriented. And obviously if I fire a whole bunch of these things on your screen, you're gonna, in a panic, oh my gosh, what's going on? I can't, you're embarrassed. You don't want people to see this and all this. And so you're gonna blindly just start clicking to try to close these windows down. I'm putting you in a panic mode. That's a way of manipulating people to click on things. But you got to be very, very careful with that, because not only is that window potentially being closed with you clicking on wherever you're trying to close it at, behind that you might be actually downloading something in the background without realizing it. So it's just something to be aware of, that that is a tactic that's used. It's called a pop under. So when you're closing the window, it's not only closing that out, but it's also clicking a download link in the background and putting something, a piece of software, malware, or potentially a backdoor. So definitely be cautious of that. A lot of the newer browsers do have pop-up blockers in them, so this isn't always a huge risk, but it is still a risk. If you do find yourself in a situation where you're not sure if the window is malicious or not, the one thing, instead of clicking on an area to close that down with your mouse, you can hit Control W on your keyboard, and that will actually close the window down with focus. The other thing is Alt F4 will also close the entire browser down. So it's just a way of getting rid of those windows sometimes without physically clicking on them. So that's just something to keep in mind for the future. So as we mentioned, email is a big tactic that's used. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about, tips on how to avoid some of those pitfalls. The easiest way to avoid a lot of these tactics is keep your personal items out of your business email. What I mean by that is don't use your business email for personal stuff. Use your personal stuff, or your personal email, for personal stuff. What I mean by that, obviously we're past the holidays right now, but Easter's coming up. Don't do your Easter shopping with your business email. Don't buy Amazon. Don't do eBay. Don't do your iTunes. Don't do any of that type of stuff with your business email. Keep your business email for business use only. The reason why is a lot of tactics that the bad guys use is to send you fake shipping notices, payment notices, login notices, and it targets, PayPal, it targets eBay, Amazon, iTunes. It targets all those consumer-oriented sites in hopes that you open up the attachment or click on a link in there, and then they got you. So if you're not using your work email for those type of activities, if you get one of those to your work email, it's going to be very easy to say, wait a minute, I don't use my work email for this, so I know this is a ploy to try to trick me. I can just simply ignore it. Whereas if you are using your business email for personal use, it's much harder to determine what's real and what isn't. And that's the idea. They try to hope that you're using your business email for non-business usage. Same thing when it comes to personal email. If you do separate your emails, what I would recommend is don't look at your personal email off of your work PC. So don't go to the web portal of your personal email from your work PC, because if you do and you inadvertently open something up in your personal email, it's almost the same thing as if you were using your business email for personal usage because you're on your work computer. If you want to check your personal email, do it on your phone, with on your data plan. That way you're off of the corporate network, and anything that might be opened up would be contained to your phone instead. So that's our recommendation. Anybody that's using Outlook, and most people do, unless you're a Mac user, sometimes people use Apple Mail. But if you are using Outlook, you'll see here, this is a screenshot of what's called the reading pane. It used to be called the preview pane back in the day. We recommend that you disable that reading pane. I know there's a lot of people that will kick and scream about that sometimes because it is convenient. And basically what it does is the highlighted message there at the top in the center, it will actually show you the contents of that over in that right-hand pane there without you physically opening it. So the problem with that is if it is a malicious email, this feature is actually opening that email without your interaction. So if there happens to be something malicious in that email that all you have to do is open it up, this feature is actually doing that for you. And if you're at lunch or you're in a meeting and that email comes in and this feature is actually opening up every email that comes into your box, that malicious email could be acting or running in the background without you even realizing it because this software opened that up for you instead of you doing it. So we recommend turning this off. To do that, obviously in the screenshot here, you can see at the top ribbon there, the view. If you go to that view tab that's highlighted and then scroll over to, a little bit to the right-hand side there where it says reading pane, if you hit that drop-down arrow there, it'll show you, I think it says left, bottom, and off. Just turn it to off. And then that reading section on the right-hand side there that's in the screenshot right now will go away. And now what you'll have to do is you'll be able to visually inspect the email before it opens up, which is what we want you to do. So you can actually see the email, say, hey, you know what, this looks like it's coming from PayPal. I don't use PayPal on my work, I can just delete it instead of this simply opening it up. And then, if you do want to open the email, you just have to double click it. So it's one extra click that you have to do versus this thing automatically opening it. But it's much more secure and much more safe if you turn this feature off in the event that it is a malicious email. So with that said, we mentioned a lot about phishing. So here's an example of a phishing email. So what this is this is an email that is crafted by a bad actor. It looks like it's coming from Microsoft Outlook, and that's the whole idea. It's intended to trick you. So it's basically saying, hey, you know what? Your password's expired. And I want you to click on that link there that says change your password, or click below to change that password. So the idea is that I'm trying to get you to interact with this email under the pretense that your password has expired. So what happens if you click on one of those two links? Well, what happens is that it's going to send you to a website, and it's going to look like Microsoft's website, and it's going to ask you for your username, which is usually your email address, and then it's going to ask you for your password, and you're going to type that in, and you're probably going to get some kind of error message, and then the page is going to redisplay itself, and you might put that information in again, and it might work the second time, or it might error out continuously. And you're not sure what's going on, and you're like, I don't get this, I don't, So basically what's happening is the bad guys set up a fake website intentionally to look like Microsoft. And when you're putting your email, your username and password in there, it's actually recording what you're typing there and sending that to the bad guys. So you're basically giving them your login and your password. The reason why it's not going to work is because it's not the real Microsoft site. So no matter how many times you put that in there, it's not going to work. But it's sending everything you type to the bad guys immediately. I mentioned sometimes it might work the second time. Well, the bad guys have gotten crafty. So they realize that they keep sending people through a loop on the bad page, that eventually they might figure out that they are on a bad page and this isn't the real Microsoft site. So what they do is the first time it's the bad page and you put that information in there, and then they redirect you to the right Microsoft site when it refreshes, and then you put that information in there, and now it works. So the idea is that the person might think that they just mistyped their password and not even give it a second thought that they entered their information on a bad page, until later down the road when they realize that their email account's compromised and they're sending all kinds of emails to everybody in their contact list asking for money because they're in jail or they need bail money or, you know, invoices, stuff like that. So just keep in mind, anytime you get one of these emails, what I recommend doing, never click on the links that are in these emails, unless it's something that you just generated, and I'll talk about that shortly. But instead of clicking on these links, if you think this might be valid, open up a browser yourself, go to the Microsoft site yourself by typing it in, log in. That way you know you're on the real Microsoft site and you're logging into the real Microsoft site. And then if this is valid, as soon as you type your password in there, it's going to prompt you saying, hey, your password needs changed. That way you don't fall victim to these type of potential tricks and ploys by clicking on those links where you don't know where they're really going. So that's what we recommend. This is just another example of it. This is just one coming from a bank, same concept. You click that link, it's going to take you to a site that looks like your bank site, and it's going to steal your banking credentials. So again, if you get one of these emails, don't click that link. Open up a browser, go to, in this case, trustedbank.com yourself by typing it in there, log in through that. That way you know you're on the real site. This is another example. Now this is more of a scare tactic one. So the other ones are kind of a trick one. This is kind of more of a scare tactic one. And people fall for this mainly because when you're put in a fight or flight mode, you don't think rationally sometimes. And that's the whole concept behind this email. So a lot of people go into that fight or flight mode, they get defensive, or they're not thinking rationally sometimes. And it's easy to manipulate people in that mode. So what this is basically, it starts out saying, hey, and this is usually directed to an individual. It says, hey, I noticed that XYZ is your password. And the reason why people fall for the rest of this is, again, because that password that person is saying there is hopefully a password that you've used in the past, but you recognize that password. And you're probably like, oh my gosh, what the heck's, you know, I don't understand what's going on here. What do you mean? They got my password. How is that possible? I know that password. And then it goes on. The rest of the email here is basically saying they've got video proof of you on adult sites, and they're going to, you know, share that with your employer, your wife, your husband, your kids, or whatever. They're going to try to shame you, basically. And again, this is a scare tactic type of phishing email. And what I can say is that, you know, outside of that fact that that password is something that you recognize, if that isn't a current password, you can pretty much ignore the rest of this because it's all BS. It's basically just a scare tactic. They don't have any video proof of you of anything, but they're trying to use that known password as a scare tactic to put you in a situation where you're not thinking rationally about the rest of this. So what you do need to worry about, though, is that password is a password that you're still using now somewhere. You need to make some wholesale changes very, very quickly because they have a password that is still active. And 9 times out of 10, your email is probably the login. And if they figure out where that combination works, they could potentially breach whatever site has that. So the idea is how did they get that password in the first place? Again, this is one of those situations where you know, a lot of sites, as I mentioned in the opening here, get breached constantly. So if you're using your business email, say for a gym membership or a book club or something like that, and that gym happened to get breached, what the first thing the bad guys go after is the usernames and the password lists that are on those systems. They dump them, take them offline, and there's software out there that'll basically guess what your password is eventually, and we'll talk about that here shortly. But they basically figured out what your password is, and you know, obviously you must have used your business email if you're getting it at your business account. So again, if you change that habit, a lot of these tactics won't work because again, you're not going to be getting this in your work email if you keep that separation and isolation. But yeah, this ties into the password stuff that we'll be talking about later as well. But that's how they potentially got that password. So this one here is called spearfishing. This is a little more targeted. So the other ones are kind of what we call scattershot. Think of it going to a pond and throwing breadcrumbs in and figuring out, if anything comes to the surface and grabs it quickly. You may not see exactly what kind of fish it is or be able to identify it, but something grabbed that breadcrumb. This one here is more specific, where you're looking for a specific person or you're targeting a specific person. So this one is targeting. Usually it's HR or payroll. So what this is someone pretending to be an employee of a company and reaching out to the payroll or HR department saying, hey, I would like my direct deposit information changed, and here's the new information, and I want it changed immediately. If you're a company that doesn't have the proper policies and procedures in place to follow up on these type of requests and not just take this blindly as gospel coming through an email, what's going to happen is come payroll time, you're going to be sending this employee's payroll to what's basically a drop account at another bank that was set up probably with stolen identity credentials. And the minute that money hits that bank account, that account gets closed out, emptied out, closed out. And by the time you realize that you were just duped, not only is the employee out the money, but so is the company. Because it's one of those things where you inadvertently didn't verify that this was actually the employee making this request. So how do you avoid this? Never, ever, ever do any type of financial request via email only. Always follow up either in person or with a phone call to a known phone number. Don't blindly ask, oh, let me call your cell, and they give you a cell number to call. If you don't have that cell number prior to that conversation, do not call that cell number, because that's another trick that they use. So call a known number or get physical, interaction with the person. More likely than not, we recommend this being in person. So if they want to change direct deposit, they have to physically come in and sign some paperwork for that. So that verifies that it's actually that person making that request. So that's how you avoid that. And then there goes on to whaling. So whaling is going after what we call the big fish. Usually it's either going after C-level folks, whether it's CEOs, CFOs, or it's pretending to be those individuals and targeting entities underneath those in the organizational chart. So basically, here's an example of that. So this is someone pretending to be the CFO, basically saying they're out of the office, and I'm assuming this Sean person is someone that probably works underneath the CFO. They can get that information again from social media, LinkedIn. Sometimes you can get that information from websites, the company websites. You can get all kinds of information about the company off of those type of places. So basically what they're asking for is a wire transfer. Again, it's a financial request that is being done via email. Sometimes it's gift cards, Amazon cards, eBay cards, you name it, whatever. So, that's the tactic that they use. Again, if you think that this could be valid, Sean should be following up with Roger either by calling him on his known cell phone number, or in this case, because he says he's out of the office, excuse me, if he actually is out of the office, wait till he comes back into the office and ask if he's actually making this request in person. Again, it's always better to verify. And any C-level person that you're trying to protect, the company's assets by verifying this request is not going to get upset by you just following up in person about this. We've had this here at our office with some admin folks that started. The day they started, they got an email claiming to be from our CEO, asking them to go buy gift cards at lunchtime. We realized where the information is coming from because they updated their LinkedIn page and there's software out there that basically scrapes that and gives them a list of targets, new people that started a company. A lot of times they're excited and not thinking rationally again. Again, it's that trick employed to try to manipulate people in a malicious way, unfortunately. And luckily, obviously she did follow up with our CEO, and we realized that it was a fake email. So now, anybody that starts with our company, we obviously let them know any emails coming from anybody that's a C-level person, come over to their office or follow up with them in person to avoid any confusion or potential pitfalls of that. So one way that one thing that you can do to kind of help eliminate some of these things. This is, you can see here on this screenshot, this is a banner. It's an external sender banner, and this is configured at. This is an example of configuring it at the Microsoft Office 365 level. So this is something that can be activated that will help you distinguish some of these fake email requests. And what I mean by that is, let's say, if we go back here a couple pages, let's say we go back to this spearfishing one that's claiming to be an internal employee. Well, in this case here, if we had that external banner on, that external banner would be on this message, and that's a huge red flag that tells in this case, whoever the HR person is or the payroll person is, wait a minute, this is supposedly an internal employee sending me a message, but it has an external sender banner on it. Why would that be? It wouldn't be, because it's a fake email. That's an instant way of telling whether it's actually a real internal person or an external entity pretending to be an internal person. Same thing with the CFO version here. Again, this would have that external banner on it because this isn't the real CFO sending that message. So you can see it's extremely easy to pick up on that banner saying, wait, this message is supposedly coming from an employee or an internal entity, but it has this external banner on it. That's a huge red flag and visual alert that says this is probably a fake email and you should look into it a little more. This is really helpful when it comes to looking at emails on your cell phone because it's real hard sometimes on the cell phone with the screen. But this banner will give a very clear indicator that this could be an outside entity trying to trick you. So if you are an M365, we highly recommend activating that. That way, it's a huge visual sign to help you in this fight against the bad guys. And it's there's no cost to it. If you're an M365, it's just a configuration change. If you're one of our clients, obviously we recommend this for all of our clients. And we will be happy to activate that for you. On the flip side, if you ever have an email that you're not 100% sure of, we tell obviously all our clients, don't blindly just open it or think whatever. Just please give our help desk a call. It takes us a matter of seconds just to simply remote in and take a quick peek at it and give it a sanity check. And we will be happy to do that at any given time, obviously. It's just something quickly that we can do. And if the person at the support desk is not sure, what ends up happening is they end up sending it over to my desk, and then I kind of look at it in a controlled environment to see if it is malicious or not. But it's something that it's always safe to be sorry. The other thing too I did mention is that with the link clicking in those emails, I mentioned don't click any of those links unless it's something that you just generated. What I mean by that is sometimes if you do legitimately change your password at some of these sites, I would say that sometimes they actually send you confirmations. Hey, did you just change your password? If so, please click this link to verify that. That's something you just generated. So in that case, I'm okay saying you could click on that link. But if you're getting that out of the blue and it's not something that you just did or expecting, in that case, obviously, open up a browser, go to whatever site it's claiming to be, and do it that way. That way, you're on the right site. So this is another tactic that the bad guys have decided to use. So this takes it one step further. So they realize that a lot of people are catching on to the phishing. They're catching on to the being more careful. So in this case, what they're doing is they're creating what's called an application. So this is basically a app that if you're not careful and you just blindly click accept here on this, it will actually give whoever created this app keys to the kingdom to your entire Microsoft ecosystem. So basically, they'll be able to read your contacts, they'll be able to get your OneDrive, they'll be able to SharePoint, your Teams, your email, your calendars, everything without your password. So basically, you're giving this application permission to access your account without your login credentials. The other thing to keep in mind too is, and we'll talk about this, if you're using multi-factor, this bypasses multi-factor as well too. So you've got to be extremely careful if you get one of these requests from an app that pops up like this little box here. From this one here, it's visual. You can really tell. You shouldn't be getting many of these anyways, but if you do get one of these, in this case, you can see this actually tells you it's a risky app. It also says that it's unverified there at the top. That's a tall tale sign that you should be clicking cancel there and not accept. The bad guys haven't figured out how to bypass the Microsoft verification process yet, and I say yet. They will, but they haven't figured out how to do it yet. But that's one thing, normally if it's a valid app, it would say verified there, and it would be certified that it's a good app. Again, what we tell our clients is that if you get one of these, give our desk a call. We'll quickly remote in, take a look at it for you and see if it's valid or not, and help you make that decision without you just blindly clicking accept here. Because again, if you do click accept here, it is very, very hard to figure out what type of access they have once you hit that. So it's not something that's easily detectable at that point. So if you think you've mistakenly clicked one of these, please let somebody know immediately. That way we can stop, potentially stop the damage that this could potentially cause. So, and then finally, with COVID and everything, the one thing that a lot of people are going to nowadays are these, basically these QR codes is what they're called. And anybody that watched the Super Bowl probably scanned that bouncing one that was during the halftime show. That was the only thing on the screen. Everyone's probably getting their phones out and scanning it. If I was a malicious actor and I wanted to hack millions of people for probably $1 million worth of 30-second commercials, it would probably pay for itself if that was a malicious one, because everybody that scanned that is going to a website that they don't even realize where they're going. So be careful what you're scanning with your phones, QR codes, and it's extremely simple to manipulate people with this. Again, that Super Bowl ad was a perfect example of it. I probably couldn't even count how many people scanned that code, not even knowing what it was. And it was genius. And luckily in that case it wasn't malicious, but it was just a marketing thing. But oh my gosh, that was genius. But yeah, as simple as dropping one of these on a restaurant table, even if the restaurant isn't using touchless menus, and a lot of them do. I could even manipulate, drop a malicious one in a restaurant that is using those, and people will scan it, and it might take them to a menu that looks like the restaurant, but it might have malicious intent behind it too. So be very, very careful what you're scanning. I'm not, you just got to be careful. There's a lot of malicious actors out there, and this is an extremely easy way of directing people to sites without them really realizing where they're going with these codes. So. All right, we're going to move on now to USB and mobile devices. And from a USB, that's a little flash drives. If you can see on my screen here, the little USB key flash drives. I know they're not used heavily much anymore, but if you do happen to find one of these on the ground or laying around and you don't know whose it is, don't plug this thing into your machine. Could be a malicious piece of software on this that as soon as you plug it in, it actually opens up your computer and allows somebody to come in remotely later on. So just hold on to this and give it to your IT person where they can check it in a secured way without plugging it into the corporate network. Or if you're one of our clients, again, we will check this out and make sure it's not malicious and then give it back. If you do use this from a file standpoint, if you happen to take files home or whatever on one of these, make sure you're doing virus scans at both sides. A lot of times you have that software on your work PCs, but you may not have it on your home PC, and something could technically hitchhike on this device, and you could bring it back into your work network if you're not careful. The other thing too is, you know, a lot of people are using smartphones, and these things are battery hogs. So what you may not realize is that, you know, a lot of people think, oh, well, my battery needs charge, so I'm just going to take the USB cord and I'm going to plug it into my desktop or my laptop and use that as a charging thing for my phone. Yes, that works, but what you may not realize is that that also, in most cases, turns your phone into a USB device too. So not only is it charging it, but you can also transfer files back and forth via your phone with that same cable that's plugged into your laptop or your desktop. That could be dangerous if something is sitting on your phone waiting to be plugged into a Windows network or something like that. Again, it's almost like plugging one of these in without knowing that. So what we recommend is, you know, obviously use your wall charger that plugs into the electrical outlet to charge your phone. Don't plug it into your actual PC when doing that. The other thing too is public charging stations. You find some of these at potentially, sometimes they're at malls, sometimes they're at airports. While there are a lot of good ones out there, there could be a malicious one that's set up, again, that will, once it's plugged in, it'll charge your phone, but it'll also steal your data because, again, this turns into a USB device. It could actually be pulling data off of your phone if it's a malicious charging site. So again, carry your wall brick with you. You know, those are allowed on planes if it's the smaller ones. You know, that way you know that that is a legitimate one and it's not going to be a potential malicious one out there. So just be cautious of that. So passwords, we mentioned a little bit about this. So I'm going to go through this quickly because we're coming up on time here, but we recommend complex, secure, and unique passwords. And I just recently changed this. We were recommending 9 characters. I'm recommending at least 10 characters now. And the next screen, I'll show you why. Excuse me. We also recommend that you have at least one special character. That's your @ sign, your pound sign, your exclamations, things like that, like a symbol. We also recommend at least an uppercase and also at least one number. So we want at least 10 characters, and it has to include at least one of those potential, or at least one of those potential different type of character sets in there. So everyone's probably saying, well, how in the heck am I supposed to remember all these passwords if they're supposed to be 10 characters long? They got to be all these, you know, unique characters and mixture of all this stuff. They have to be different for every site I go to. How am I supposed to remember all this? Well, there's a couple ways to do it, and what I recommend is recording your password in some way, shape, or form that is recorded in a secure manner. Now, there are online password managers that are out there. I personally don't use them because they're huge targets for the bad guys. The bad guys know that those sites have all these passwords in them, and they're huge targets. And a couple of them have been breached multiple times already. So I would be very, very cautious about using those. I'm not saying don't, but I personally don't use them. What I actually do is I actually write my passwords on in a text file, actually. I do store it on a USB key. This USB key is encrypted. So basically, for me to get access to what's on this key, I have one password that I have to memorize. It's a very large password. So when I plug this into my machine, it's going to ask me for a password to unlock this. And when I unlock this with the password that I memorized, all my other passwords are recorded in a text file here. But they're recorded in such a way that if somebody does happen to get access to this in some way, shape, or form, figures out what my password is, the passwords that are on this still aren't going to work. So what I mean by that is my passwords are on a text file. Let's say I'm using a 10 character password. On that text file, I may only be recording seven characters of my password. There's 3 missing characters on every one of my passwords. I know what those 3 missing characters are. I know what position those characters are. It could be at the beginning, it could be at the end, it could be a combination. I know what that combination is. That way, if someone comes across this by chance and sees what those passwords are, they're going to try what's written in that text file. It is not going to work, and they're going to think that this is just an old list. Whereas if I look at this, I know, oh, for XYZ site, this is the password, and I need to include these 3 characters in whatever formula I know what that is. So again, you're recording your passwords in such a way that they're secure, but you can also remember what those missing characters are. And those missing characters can, obviously can be all the same. So it could be A, B, C, or whatever. I'm not saying make it that easy, but it could be that. Just something easily for you to remember, and you need to add them to whatever passwords that are on that recorded list. You could do the opposite. You can also add extra characters on your list, and then you need to pull those characters off when you go to enter them in. So if you're using 10 characters, you might put 14 characters on your list. But you need to pull off the extra 4 characters wherever that is on your list. It could be at the beginning, it could be at the end, it could be a combination of both. 1 at the beginning, 3 at the end, 2 at the beginning, 2 at the end, whatever that combination is. You know what that combination is, but someone coming across that list would not. Now, in the case of adding characters, I'm going to caution you. You cannot use the same characters for that padding that you're doing. You have to mix those characters up. It doesn't matter what they are because you're not using them anyways, but you have to make sure they're different. And the reason why you have to make sure they're different is because there's software out there that if I get that list of passwords off of here and I run that through what basically is a pattern recognition software, if I'm using the same characters for every one of those added characters, that software is going to pick up that pattern. And then I'm going to think that, oh, well, maybe those are added characters, and I'm going to pull them off, and I'm going to get your real password at that point. It's something you got to keep in mind. So a lot of times people opt for the missing characters because it's easier, and it can be the same characters. It could be your initials. It could. I'm not saying make it that simple, but I'm just saying it could be. So it's something that you easily remember and things like that. So that's a way of recording your passwords in such a way that you can remember them and keep them unique across the board. Now, why do we recommend 10 characters? Well, this was just recently updated, and this basically shows you the time it takes to basically brute force a password. So if I happen to get your password hash, which is basically an encrypted version of what your password is, and it is 9 characters long, you can see here on the chart, if it's 9 characters long, and let's say you're using numbers only, I can guess that instantaneously. I will have that password in a matter of seconds. And you go across here, same thing. If it's lowercase letters, I will have that in a matter of seconds. As you go across here, you can see if you do the numbers, uppercase, lowercase letters, and symbols as we suggest at 10 characters, it's going to take 5 months basically to guess that potential password. Now, granted, I could hit it instantly, and it could be within seconds. But to go through every possible combination of what that is with 10 characters, it would take me 5 months to get through that. Now, the idea is that we recommend changing passwords every 90 days. So that's every 3 months. So by the time a bad guy guesses your password, potentially, your password has already been changed. So they're guessing an old password, and that whole process has to start all over again. So that's kind of the concept. It's a cat and mouse game. But this was just recently updated because, there's software out there that was able to crack passwords a lot faster. Before the 5 months used to be up in the 9 character range, and now with the latest technology and the latest graphics cards, which are what are used to crack these passwords, they're so much faster that, that's why I'm recommending probably 10 characters at this point, just to keep you out there. If you really want to go, really high, you can go 11, 12, 13, 14, and then you're talking many, 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 many years, but you're also adding a lot of characters to your password. So the other thing too that you want to keep in mind is multi-factor. I brought this up a little bit. What is multi-factor? It's a concept of something you have and something you know. So the something you know is your login and your password. So basically when you log in with your username and password, you're going to get prompted for a code. That code is usually sent to your cell phone, and it's going to ask you for a code that's on your cell phone, or it might actually push to your cell phone saying, hey, is this you logging in? And you hit accept. That's multi-factor. So the something you have is your cell phone. So the idea is that if someone gets your login and your password without this having their phone, it makes it very, very difficult for them to breach your account. MFA does stop 99.99% of the hacking attempts that are out there. Again, there's still that 0.01% that potentially could happen because nothing is 100% foolproof. But multi-factor is definitely something that if you're not using for your email for sure, or your financial institutions or things like that, you should be using it and you should activate it. So just something to keep in mind that it should be used. So the public Wi-Fi, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. All I will say is that, and this is like using Wi-Fi at the airports, the hotels, restaurants, wherever, any place that public Wi-Fi is offered, be very, very careful what you are doing on that public Wi-Fi. I would not be doing any financial transactions. I would not be doing checking my email. I wouldn't be doing much of anything. My pretense is that unless you're going to walk up to a complete stranger on the sidewalk and tell them and show them what you're doing on your computer on that public Wi-Fi, you probably don't want to be on public Wi-Fi, because that is in essence what you're doing. Pretty much, if there's a malicious actor on that public Wi-Fi, they can basically see everything you're doing, and they can take over login accounts too, very, very, very easily. So be very, very cautious of that. What I recommend is if you do need internet on your PC, tether it to your data plan on your cell phone. Most people have unlimited plans now on there, and you can turn this into a hotspot, connect to your cell phone with your laptop or your computer, and go that route. And it's much safer than public Wi-Fi. If you do want to know more about this and some of the risks that are involved in this, if you go to our website, pcatg.com, we have a few podcasts that talk about a lot of this stuff that in more depth. They're like 15 minutes or so. It's just recordings. You can go there and listen to those podcasts. We talk about social media. We talk about passwords. We talk about public Wi-Fi. We talk about a variety of different things. We're constantly adding more stuff there. It's just more in-depth, quick follow-ups to this presentation if you want to know more about why some of these risks are what they are. But I highly suggest checking that out on the public Wi-Fi side. So as a reminder, obviously you only want to collect the data that you need. That's in regards to, any client information. If you're only regulated for 7 years or 5 years, don't hold 10 years, because if something happens, you're liable for that. You also want to limit access to systems with sensitive data. Obviously you want logins and passwords on everything. Secure your personal devices. Firewalls, make sure that they're set up properly, as well as your networks. Disable accounts of former employees. Obviously let your IT firm or entities know that the person is gone. Don't leave that account empty. Make sure your backups are done and make sure they're checked. That's your saving grace in the event that something does happen from a ransomware standpoint. And that's pretty much it. Hopefully these tips and tricks will help you try to avoid some of the tactics that are used. As I mentioned, we do these on a monthly basis. They do have, the information does get updated. I try to update this frequently based on what happens out there in the real world. So a lot of it is repetitive too. So if you have any coworkers or anything that you feel would benefit from these, we do have them monthly. You can go to our website and check out the upcoming events. So anybody that's attended here, we will be sending out a certificate of completion for this. If you need it for compliance issues or cybersecurity, there are some links there as well. I think they were put in chat as well for our YouTube channel, for our security-focused podcast stuff, our events pages there. If you do have any questions, concerns, or anything from that standpoint, we would be happy to. You can email info@PCATG. We could also potentially perform a assessment for you if you think it's something that you'd be interested in here. Let me just check chat here real quick. Let me see here. I don't see any questions in the chat right now. Some comments about dark web scans. Yeah, I don't see any questions in there, so I think that will pretty much wrap us up. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Appreciate your time, and hopefully this was beneficial. And again, if you do have any questions or have any follow-up concern, please email us at info@pcatg.com. I thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your day.